So we're recording and yay, I'm not getting any feedback. I guess I had too many windows open or I don't know what I did wrong, but I did something wrong. So again, hello, I'm Adorkable. I live here in the United States of America. Wherever you are listening to me, I'm super excited to meet you. And what I'm going to do here with my stream is something just a little bit different. I think I'm not going to be doing gaming on this one. I do game on another streaming platform, but I wanted to read books. I feel like I need to do something a little bit more for me besides just playing games. So I wanted to read. And I decided, and hopefully this is being seen outside of just the United States, because one of the things I wanted to do was to read books. And I'm going to show you guys the book on, or whatever it is I'm reading. I'm reading a PDF on the screen because I think that, or I'm hoping, maybe wherever you are, you want to learn a little English or something, or you want to improve your English. If you want to sound kind of wonky like I do, I'm from Oklahoma. I think I said that. So I have kind of an accent, but I'm hoping that maybe it's not just something people here in the United States might enjoy, but maybe if it's the evening wherever you are, morning, whatever time, and you just don't want to be alone, I'll sit here and I'll read to you. And I will upload these to YouTube on my YouTube channel, which is The Adorkable Blonde. Um, I guess I will try and find a place to put a link. Maybe I'll add that in here. But you can find me at The Adorkable Blonde on YouTube, where I will upload these so that way if you miss a chapter or something, you don't have to worry about getting too far behind. But for my first book, I picked a book that I've wanted to read for some time. I've had it in my house for about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and I have never read it. But it is The Art of War. A lot of people have probably heard of this book. And I always hear little pieces of it, and it sounds really, really cool, but I've never read it. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to read it. So I had to find a version because I'm in the United States and there's all these copyright laws. So this one was translated back in like 1910. So I don't know how good the translation's going to be, but I'm just going to start reading. And we'll read maybe a couple of chapters a day. I don't know how long this is, but just join me and listen. And if you want to download it, I will put, I guess, in my YouTube video. I don't know where to put all that info here, but you can download this for free here in the United States, probably anywhere else you can get a hold of the website. So feel free to follow along if you want to. But so this is the book, and this is the intro page. To my brother, this is the person who translated it. To my brother, Captain Valentine Giles, R.C., in the hope that a work 2,400 years old may yet contain lessons worth consideration on the soldier of something. I don't know, the soldier of something. This translation is affectionately dedicated. That's some kind of fancy writing. I don't know. I couldn't read it exactly. But thankfully the rest of it is typed out properly. So here's our contents. We're just going to go ahead and get started. I guess I'll go ahead and read all of this. So this is like some weird English. This is going to be written in Old English because, like I said, it's over 100 years old. Of course, the book is like 2,400 years old, but this translation is about a little over 100 years old. So, preface. The 7th volume of Mémoires concernant la histoire, les sciences, les arts, les mœurs, les usages, and des Chinois. That's French. My French was probably really bad, but that's what it says. Basically, that said memories concerning the history of the sciences, the arts, the something, and use in something, I don't know, is devoted to the art of war and contains, amongst other treatises, Les 13 Articles de Sun-Si. I guess that's the 3 articles of someone. Translated from the Chinese by a Jesuit father, Joseph Emois. Père Emois appears to have enjoyed no small reputation as a sinologue in his day, and the field of his labors was certainly extensive. But his so-called translation of Sun Tzu, if placed side by side with the original, is seen at once to be little better than an imposture. It contains a great deal that Sun Tzu did not write, and very little indeed of what he did. Here is a fair specimen taken from the opening sentences of chapter 5. So apparently what I can gather here is they are not saying very nice things about another translation. So here's a fair specimen taken from the opening sentences of chapter 5. De l'habité dans les gouvernements les troupes. Sun Tzu dit. Okay, that's all French. I'm not even going to try and read French. So he read something throughout the 19th century, which saw a wonderful development in the study of Chinese literature. No translator ventured to tackle Sun Tzu, although his work, and if I'm saying that wrong and somebody knows, maybe, I don't know, message me and figure out how to send me an audio file to tell me how to pronounce it. I do have a Discord. Maybe I'll get that set up so someone can tell me how it's supposed to sound. Although his work was known to be highly valued in China as by far the oldest and best compendium of military science, and we've got some kind of a thing here, but I'll do my best to try and figure out what they're saying. It was not until the year 1905 that the first English translation by Captain E.F. Calthrop, RFA, appeared at Tokyo under the title Sanshi, the Japanese form of Sun Tzu. Unfortunately, it was evident that the translator's knowledge of Chinese was far too scanty to fit him to grapple with the manifold difficulties of Sun Tzu. He himself plainly acknowledges that without the aid of two Japanese gentlemen, the accompanying translation would have been impossible. We can only wonder, then, what with their help it should have been so excessively bad. It is not merely a question of downright blunders, from which no one can hope to be wholly exempt. Omissions were frequent, and hard passages were willfully distorted or slurred over. Such offenses are less pardonable. They would not be tolerated in any edition of a Greek or Latin classic, and as a similar standard of honesty ought to be insisted upon in translations from Chinese. From blemishes of this nature, at least, I believe that the present translation is free. It was not undertaken out of any inflated estimate of my own powers, but could not help feeling that Sun Tzu deserved a better fate than had befallen him. And I know that, at any rate, I could hardly fail to improve on the work of my predecessors. Boy, he is really throwing some shade to those other people. Towards the end of 1908, a new and revised edition of Captain Calthrop's translation was published in London, this time, however, without any allusion to his Japanese collaborators. My first 3 chapters were then already in the printer's hands, so that the criticisms of Captain Calthrop therein contained must be understood as referring to his earlier edition, and the subsequent chapters have, of course, transferred my attention to the second edition. This is on whole an improvement on the other, though there still remains much that cannot pass muster. Some of the grosser blunders have been rectified, and I don't even know what that word is, lacunae filled up, but on the other hand, a certain number of new mistakes appear. The very first sentence of the introduction is startlingly inaccurate, and later on, while mention is made of an army of Japanese commentators on Sun Tzu, who are these, by the way, not a word is vouchsafed about the Chinese commentators, who nevertheless, I venture to assert, form a much more numerous and infinitely more important army. A few special features of the present volume may now be noticed. In the first place, the text has been cut up into numbered paragraphs, both in order to facilitate cross-reference and for the convenience of students generally. The division follows broadly that of Sun Xingyan's edition, but I have sometimes found it desirable to join 2 or more of his paragraphs into one. In quoting from other works, Chinese writers seldom give more than the bare title by way of reference, and the task of research is apt to be seriously hampered in consequence. With a view to obviating this difficulty so far as Sun Tzu is concerned, I have also appended a complete concordance of Chinese characters, following in this the admirable example of Leg, although an alphabetical arrangement which has been preferred to the distribution under radicals which he adopted. Another feature borrowed from the Chinese classics is the printing of text, translation, and notes on the same page. The notes, however, are inserted according to the Chinese method immediately after the passages to which they refer. From the mass of native commentary, my aim has been to extract the cream only, adding Chinese text here and there when it seemed to present points of literary interest. Though constituting it in itself an important branch of Chinese literature, very little commentary of this kind has hitherto been made directly accessible by translation. I may say in conclusion that, owing to the printing off of my sheets as they were completed, the work has not had the benefit of a final revision. On a review of the whole, without modifying the substance of my criticisms, I might have been inclined, in a few instances, to temper their asperity. Having chosen to wield a bludgeon, however, I shall not cry out if in return I am visited with more than a rap over the knuckles. Indeed, I have been at some pains to put a sword into the hands of future opponents by scrupulously giving either text or reference for every passage translated. A scathing review, even from the pen of the Shanghai critic who despises mere translations, would not, I must confess, be altogether unwelcome. For, after all, the worst fate I shall have to dread is that which befell the ingenious paradoxes of George in The Vicar of Wakefield. I have not read The Vicar of Wakefield, so I have no idea what that means. So, introduction. Sun Wu and his book. Sima Qian gives the following biography of Sun Tzu. And I'm sure you guys are laughing at how I pronounce the words that are not English. So again, once I get everything set up, maybe we'll be able to come up with a way so that people can kind of share how it should sound. So maybe I can get my pronunciation of some of these a little better. But I just thought that this would be a really cool book to read. So let's see. So Sun Tzu Wu was a native of the Qi state. His art of war brought him to the notice of Ho Lu, king of Wu. Ho Lu said to him, I have carefully perused your 13 chapters. May I submit your theory of managing soldiers to a slight test? Sun Tzu replied, You may. Ho Lu asked, May the test be applied to women? The answer was again in the affirmative. So arrangements were made to bring 180 ladies out of the palace. Sun Tzu divided them into 2 companies and placed one of the king's favorite concubines as the head of each. He then bade them all take spears in their hands and addressed them thus. I presume you know the difference between front and back, right hand and left. The girls replied yes. Sun Tzu went on. When I say eyes front, you must look straight ahead. When I say left turn, you must face towards your left hand. When I say right turn, you must face towards your right hand. When I say about turn, you must face right round towards the back. Again, the girls assented. The words of command having been thus explained, he set up the halberds and battle axes in order to begin the drill. Then, to the sound of drums, he gave the order, right turn. But the girls only burst out laughing. Sun Tzu said, if words of command are not clear and distinct, if orders are not thoroughly understood, then the general is to blame. So he started drilling them again and this time gave the order, left turn. Whereupon the girls once more burst into fits of laughter. Sun Tzu said, if words of command are not clear and distinct, if orders are not thoroughly understood, the general is to blame. But if his orders are clear, and the soldiers nevertheless disobey, then it is the fault of their officers. So saying, he ordered the leaders of the 2 companies to be beheaded. Now the king of Wu was watching the scene from the top of a raised pavilion, and when he saw that his favorite concubines were about to be executed, he was greatly alarmed and hurriedly sent down the following message. We are now quite satisfied as to our general's ability to handle troops. If we are bereft of these 2 concubines, our meat and drink will lose their savor. It is our wish that they shall not be beheaded." Sun Tzu replied, "Having once received His Majesty's commission to be general of his forces, there are certain commands of His Majesty which, acting in that capacity, I am unable to accept." Accordingly, he had the 2 leaders beheaded and straightway installed the pair next in order as leaders in their place. When this had been done, the drum was sounded for the drill once more, and the girls went through all the evolutions, turning to the right or to the left, marching ahead or wheeling back, kneeling or standing, with perfect accuracy and precision, not venturing to utter a sound. Then Sun Tzu sent a messenger to the king, saying, "Your soldiers, sire, are now properly drilled and disciplined and ready for your Majesty's inspection. They can be put to any use that their sovereign may desire. Bid them go through fire and water, and they will not disobey." But the king replied, "Let our generals cease drilling and return to camp. As for us, we have no wish to come down and inspect the troops." Thereupon Sun Tzu said, "The king is only fond of words and cannot translate them into deeds." After that, Ho Lu saw that Sun Tzu was one who knew how to handle an army, and finally appointed him general. In the west, he defeated the Chu state and forced his way into Ying, the capital. To the north, he put fear into the states of Qi and Chen and spread his fame abroad amongst feudal princes. And Sun Tzu shared in the might of the king. About Sun Tzu himself, this is all that Susma Chien has to tell us in this chapter. But he proceeds to give a biography of his descendant, Sun Pin, born about 100 years after his famous ancestor's death, and also the outstanding military genius of his time. The historian speaks of him too as Sun Tzu, and in his preface we read, "Sun Tzu had his feet cut off and yet continued to discuss the art of war." It seems likely then that Pin was a nickname bestowed on him after his mutilation, unless indeed the story was invented in order to account for the name. The crowning incident of his career, the crushing defeat of his treacherous rival, Pang Chuan, will be found briefly related on page 40. To return to the elder Sun Tzu, he is mentioned in 2 other passages in the Shi Qi. In the 3rd year of his reign, 512 BC, Ho Lu, king of Wu, took the field with Su Hu, Wu Yuan, and Po Pei and attacked Chu. He captured the town of Shu and slew the 2 princes' sons who had formerly been generals of Wu. He was then meditating a descent on Ying, the capital. But the general Sun Wu said, "The army is exhausted. It is not yet possible. We must wait." After further successful fighting in the 9th year, 506 BC, King Ho Lu of Wu addressed Wu Zhuxiu and Sun Wu, saying, "Formerly you declared that it was not yet possible for us to enter Ying. Is the time ripe now?" The 2 men replied, "Chu's general, Zhu Chang, is grasping and covetous, and the princes of Tang and Sai both have a grudge against him. If your Majesty has resolved to make a grand attack, you must win over Tang and Sai, and then you may succeed." Ho Lu followed this advice, beat Chu in 5 pitched battles, and marched into Ying. This is the latest date at which anything is recorded of Sun Wu. He does not appear to have survived his patron, who died from the effects of a wound in 496. In the chapter entitled This, the earlier portion of which M. Chavannes believes to be a fragment of a treatise on military weapons, there occurs this passage. From this time onward, a number of famous soldiers arose, one after the other. Cao Fan, who was employed by the Qin state, Wang Zhu in the service of Qi, and Sun Wu in the service of Wu. These men developed and threw light upon the principles of war. I'm not going to read the notes. It is obvious that Sima Qian at least had no doubt about the reality of Sun Wu as a historical personage, and with one exception, to be noticed presently, he is by far the most important authority on the period in question. It will not be necessary, therefore, to say much of such a work as the Wu Yu Chen Qiu, which is supposed to have been written by Chao Ye of the 1st century AD. The attribution is somewhat doubtful, but even if it were otherwise, his account would be of little value. Whoops. Lost my camera. I'm back. Where was I? The attribution is somewhat doubtful, but even if it was otherwise, his account would be of little value, based as it is on the Shi Qi and expanded with romantic details. Oh man, we're going to miss all the romantic details. The story of Sun Tzu will be found for what it is worth in Chapter 2. The only new points in it worth noting are 1. Sun Tzu was first recommended to Ho Lu by Wu Zhuxiu. He is called a native of Wu. He had previously lived a retired life, and his contemporaries were unaware of his ability. The following passage occurs in this Huainan Su. When sovereign and ministers show perversity of mind, it is impossible even for a Sun Tzu to encounter the foe. Assuming that this work is genuine, and hitherto no doubt has been cast upon it, we have here the earliest direct reference to Sun Tzu, for Huainan Tzu died in 122 BC, many years before the Shi Qi was given to the world. Lu Xiang, BC 80-9, in his whatever that is, says the reason why Sun Wu at the head of 30,000 men beat Chu with 200,000 is that the latter were undisciplined. Tang Mingshi, in his works completed in 1134, informs us that this surname, was bestowed on Sun Wu's grandfather by this person, Duke Qing of Qi, 547 to 490 BC. Sun Wu's father, Sun Ping, rose to be a minister of state in Qi, and Sun Wu himself, whose style was Changqing, fled to Wu on account of the rebellion which was being fomented by the kindred of Tian Pao. He had 3 sons, of whom the second, named Ming, was the father of Sun Pen. According to this account, then, Pen was the grandson of Wu, which, considering that Sun Pen's victory over Wei was gained in 341 BC, may be dismissed as chronologically impossible. Whence these data were obtained by Tang Mingshi, I do not know, but of course no reliance whatever can be placed on them. An interesting document, which has survived from the close of the Han period, is the short preface written by the great Cao Cao or Wei Wei Ti for his edition of Sun Tzu. I shall give it in full. I have heard that the ancients used bows and arrows to their advantage. The Lun Yu says there must be a sufficiency of military strength. The Shu Qing mentions the army among the 8 objects of government. The I Ching says army indicates firmness and justice. The experienced leader will have good fortune. And these are more notes about the actual Chinese characters, and I don't read Chinese. The Shi Qing says, the king rose majestic in his wrath, and he marshaled his troops. The Yellow Emperor, Tang, the Completer, and Wu Wang all used spears and battle axes in order to succor their generation. The Tsuma Fa says, if one man slay another of set purpose, he himself may rightfully be slain. He who relies solely on warlike measures shall be exterminated. He who relies solely on peaceful measures shall perish. Instances of this are Fu Chai on the one hand and Yen Wang on the other. In military matters, the sage's rule is normally to keep the peace and to move his forces only when occasion requires. He will not use armed force unless driven to it by necessity. Many books have I read on the subject of war and fighting, but the work composed by Sun Wu is the profoundest of them all. Excuse me, I did not mean to yawn. Sun Tzu was a native of the Qi state. His personal name was Wu. He wrote The Art of War in 13 chapters for Ho Lu, king of Wu. Its principles were tested on women, and he was subsequently made a general. He led an army westwards, crushed the Chu state, and entered Ying, the capital. In the north, he kept Qi and Qin in awe. 100 years and more after his time, Sun Pen lived. He was a descendant of Wu. In his treatment of deliberation and planning, the importance of rapidity in taking the field, clearness of conception, and depth of design, Sun Tzu stands beyond the reach of carping criticism. My contemporaries, however, have failed to grasp the full meaning of his instructions, and while putting into practice the smaller details in which his work abounds, they have overlooked its essential purport. That is the motive which has led me to outline a rough explanation of the whole. One thing to be noticed in the above is the explicit statement that the 13 chapters were specially composed for King Ho Lu. This is supported by the internal evidence of Chapter 1, Section 15, in which it seems clear that some ruler is addressed. In the bibliographical section of the Han Shu, there is an entry which has given rise to much discussion. This must be it. The works of Sun Tzu of Wu in 82 pian or chapters with diagrams in 9 chuan. It is evident that this cannot be merely the 13 chapters known to Sima Qian or those we possess today. Chang So-chia in his refers to an edition of Sun Tzu's of which the 13 chapters form the first chuan, adding that there were 2 other chuan besides. This has brought forth a theory that the bulk of these 82 chapters consisted of other writings of Sun Tzu. We should call them apocryphal. Where was I? We should call them apocryphal, similar to the Wen Ta, of which a specimen dealing with the 9 situations is preserved in the Tuang Tian and another in Ho Shi's commentary. Whew, we haven't even gotten to the book yet. We're still in the introduction. That before his interview with Ho Lu, Sun Tzu had only written the 13 chapters, but afterwards composed a sort of exegesis in the form of question and answer between himself and the king. Pai Ishan, author of something, Sun Tzu Xu Lu, backs this up with a quotation from, oops, gotta move here. I'm all tangled up. I'm trying to move. Okay. I've been sitting down too long. I'm going to try and stand up here for a minute. Oh, okay. That's where I am. The king of Wu summoned Sun Tzu and asked him questions about the art of war. And I'm reading from a different screen, so if anybody comments anything, I'll try and remember to keep checking to see. Oops. Yuck. Oops. Pushed the wrong button on my laptop. Okay. The king of Wu summoned Sun Tzu and asked him questions about the art of war. Each time he set forth a chapter of his work, the king could not find words enough to praise him. As he points out, if the whole work was expounded on the same scale as in the above-mentioned fragments, whoops, didn't mean to do that. The total number of chapters could not fail to be considerable. Then the numerous other treatises attributed to Sun Tzu might also be included. The fact that the Han Qi mentions no work of Sun Tzu except the 82 pian, whereas the Su and Tang bibliographies gives the title of others in addition to the 13 chapters is good proof. Pai Ishwan thinks that all of these were contained in the 82 PN. Without pinning our faith to the accuracy of details supplied by the Wu Yu Chun Chu, or admitting the geniusness of any of the treatises cited by Pai Ishwan, we may see in this theory a probable solution for the mystery. Between Suma Chien and Pan Ku, there was plenty of time for a luxuriant crop of forgeries to have grown up under the magic name of Sun Tzu, and the 82 PN may very well represent a collected edition of these lumped together with the original work. It is also possible, though less likely, that some of them existed in the time of earlier historian and were purposely ignored by him. Tu Mu, after So Kung and the most important commentator on Sun Tzu, composed the preface to his edition about the middle of the 9th century. After a somewhat lengthy defense of the military art, he comes at last to Sun Tzu himself and makes one or two very startling assertions. The writings of Sun Wu, he says, originally comprised several 100,000 words. But Cao Cao, the emperor, Wu Wei, pruned away all redundancies and wrote out the essence of the whole, so as to form a single book in 13 chapters. He goes on to remark that Cao Cao's commentary on Sun Tzu leaves a certain proportion of difficulties unexplained. This, in Tu Mu's opinion, does not necessarily imply that he was unable to furnish a complete commentary. According to the Wei Qi, Cao himself wrote a book on war in something over 100,000 words, known as the whatever those two symbols are. Whoops. It appears to have been such an exceptional merit that he suspects Cao to have used for it the surplus material which he had found in Sun Tzu. He concludes, however, by saying, the Sinshu is now lost, so the truth cannot be known for certain. Tu Mu's conjecture seems to be based upon a passage in this book. Wei Wuti strung together Sun Wu's Art of War, which in may turn have resulted from a misunderstanding of the final words of Cao Kung's preface. This, as Sun Xingyan points out, is only a modest way of saying that he made an explanatory paraphrase, or in other words, wrote a commentary on it. On the whole, the theory has met with very little acceptance. Thus, the something says, the mention of the 13 chapters in the Shi Qi shows that there were in existence before Han Qi, and that later accretions are not to be considered part of the original work. Tu Mu's assertion can certainly not be taken as proof. There is every reason to suppose, then, that the 13 chapters existed in the time of Suma Chien practically as we have them now. Okay. That's crazy because up till now it made it sound like they had no idea what was going on. And they're like, oh no, but yeah, no reason to think that it's not the 13 chapters the way we think it is. It's a long way to get back to where we started. That the work was then well known, he tells us in so many words. Sun Tzu's 13 chapters and Wu Qi's Art of War are the two books that people commonly refer to on the subject of military matters. Both of them are widely distributed, so I will not discuss them here. But as we go further back, serious difficulties begin to arise. The salient fact which has to be faced is that the So Chuan, the great contemporary record, makes no mention whatever of Sun Wu either as a general or as a writer. It is natural, in view of this awkward circumstance, that many scholars should not only cast doubt on the story of Sun Wu as given in this Shi Qi, but even show themselves frankly skeptical as to the existence of the man at all. The most powerful presentment of this side of the case is to be found in the following disquisition by Ye Shu Win. Oh my gosh, I'm so confused and we haven't even started the book yet. I'm starting to wish I had skipped reading the preface. So now they're saying that they don't even know if he existed. Okay. Well, we'll keep going on this and see where we end up before we even start the book. It is stated in Sima Qian's history that Sun Wu was a native of the Qi state and employed by Wu, and that in the reign of Ho Lu he crushed the Chu, entered Ying, and was a great general. But in Sou's commentary, no Sun Wu appears at all. It is true that Sou's commentary need not contain absolutely everything other than the histories contain, but okay. I'm okay. I'm losing myself because I'm trying to do two things at once here. Need not contain absolutely everything that other histories contain, but so has not omitted to mention the vulgar plebeians and hireling ruffians such as Ying, Cao Shu, Cao Kui, Chu Chiwa, and Chuan Setshu. Okay, hang on a minute. I'm going to pause for just a minute and do something. Give me just 2 seconds. Okay, I'm back. I just had to get myself resettled here. This is getting confusing to me. Oops, I lost my video. There we are. What am I doing here? Okay. I'm trying to get comfy on my bed here is what I'm trying to do without unplugging all of my cords. Whoops. Hopefully I don't hit too many buttons. I just saw I flopped my phone over. I don't have like a streamer studio. I have a bunch of kids, like 4. I don't know if that's a bunch wherever you are, but sometimes to me it feels like a bunch. Anyway, so they have all the computer spaces. Each one of my kids has a desk, and they have their own little spaces for everything, and I don't have a desk anymore. So I just have to sit on my bed using my laptop. Right now, my phone, I don't have a phone stand, so to keep my phone up so that the camera is on me, I'm using like, it's kind of hilarious. Like the other day when I was streaming to keep my phone up, I was using a towel. Today I'm using a roll of paper towels. So yeah, there's that, because we are fancy schmancy here. Very, very high tech. I know, right? Let's see if I can get this a little closer. Whoops. There you go. I love my little model. I just have to tell you that sometimes I'll just sit here and I'll just watch myself with the eyebrows. I'm not moving at all now, though, so why am I not moving at all? Oh, no, what's wrong with my model? My phone is hot. That's what's wrong. We're frozen. Nobody told me I was frozen. Are we still frozen? Okay. I'm going to shut my model down real quick. See if we can't bring it back up. Usually when I stream, I have one of my kids follow along and tell me what's going on. Nobody's on tonight. They're all playing their own thing tonight. So that didn't work. Oh no. Let's see what happens. Oh, yep, there we go. Now we're back. Yay. Okay. Looks like my model's back on line here. Okay. So model's back online. Yay. Let's see what else is going on. I think everything else looks okay. Whoosh. Okay, so we will continue. Everything still looks okay. Looking okay, looking okay. Guess so. I guess I can get rid of that word test because nobody really cares. I thought I cleared that out before I started, but apparently not. Let's get a new message. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Yay. Okay, so now let's get back to business. Okay. Actually, we'll get back to business in just 2 more seconds. I'm going to take a drink here. Okay. My microphone back on? Yep. Okay. So now we will get back to business. So, blah, blah, blah. They talked about these people. In the case of Sun Wu, whose fame and achievements were so brilliant. And I'm going to try and use my mouse to follow along, kind of, so you'll know where I am. But then sometimes I get distracted and forget to move my mouse. So I apologize, but I'll try and keep on top of that. In the case of Sun Wu, whose fame and achievements were so brilliant, the omission is much more glaring. Again, details are given in their due order about his contemporaries Wu Yan and the minister Pei. The minister Pei. Is it credible that Sun Wu alone should have been passed over? In point of literary style, Sun Tzu's work belongs in the same school as Quan Tzu and Lu Tao and this person, Wei Wu. That's not Wu, that's you. You, we'll just say it, call him you. And may have been the production of some private scholar living towards the end of the spring and autumn, or the beginning of the Warring States period. The story that his precepts were actually applied by the Wu state is merely the outcome of big talk on the part of his followers. From the flourishing period of the Chou dynasty down to the time of the spring and autumn, all military commanders were statesmen as well, and the class of professional generals for conducting external campaigns did not then exist. It was not until the period of the Six States that this custom changed. Although Wu was an uncivilized state, it is conceivable that So should have left unrecorded the fact that Sun Wu was a great general and yet held no civil office. What we are told, therefore, about Zhang Chu and Sun Wu is not authentic matter, but the reckless fabrication of theorizing pundits. The story of Ho Lu's experiment on the women in particular is utterly preposterous and incredible. Ye Shu Wen represents Suma Qian as having said that Sun Wu crushed Chu and entered Ying. This is not quite correct. No doubt the impression left on the reader's mind is that he at least shared in these exploits, but the actual subject of the verbs, these, and certainly these symbols, as shown by the next words, all these symbols, the fact may or may not have been significant, but it is nowhere explicitly stated in the Shu Qi that either Sun Zhu was the general on the occasion of the taking of Ying or that he even went there at all. Moreover, as we know that Wu Yan and Po Pei both took part in the expedition, and also that its success was largely due to the dash and enterprise of Fu Kai, Ho Lu's younger brother. It is not easy to see how yet another general could have played a very prominent part in the same campaign. Chen Sun of the Sung dynasty has the note. Military writers look upon Sun Wu as the father of their art. But the fact that he does not appear in the So Chuan, although he is said to have served under Ho Lu, king of Wu, makes it uncertain what period he really belonged to. He also says, the works of Sun Wu and Wu Qi may be of genuine antiquity. It is noticeable that both Ye Shu... I'm getting tired. I'm not even pronouncing any words right. Both this person and Chen Chensun, while rejecting the personality of Sun Wu as he figures in Sima Qian's history, are inclined to accept the date traditionally assigned to the work which passes under his name. The author of the Su Lu fails to appreciate this distinction, and consequently, his bitter attack on Chen Chensun really misses its mark. He makes one or two points, however, which certainly tell in favor of the high antiquity of our 13 chapters. Sun Tzu, he says, must have lived in the age of Qing Wang 519 to 476, because he is frequently plagiarized in subsequent works of the Zhou, Qin, and Han dynasties. The two most shameless offenders in this respect are Wu Qi and Huainan Su, both of them important historical personages in their day. The former lived only a century after the alleged date of Sun Tzu, and his death is known to have taken place in 381 BC. It was to him, according to Lu Xiang, that Zhen Shen delivered to Su Chuan, which had been entrusted to him by its author. Now, the fact that quotations from The Art of War, acknowledged or otherwise, are to be found in so many authors of different epochs establishes a very strong probability that there was some common source anterior to them all. In other words, that Sun Tzu's treatise was already in existence towards the end of the 5th century BC. Further proof of Sun Tzu's antiquity is furnished by the archaic or wholly obsolete meanings attaching to a number of the words he uses. A list of these, which might perhaps be extended, is given in the Su Lu, and though some of the interpretations are doubtful, the main argument is hardly affected thereby. Again, it must not be forgotten that Ye Xuanzin, a scholar and critic of the first rank, deliberately pronounces the style of the 13 chapters to belong to the early part of the 5th century. Seeing that he is actually engaged in an attempt to disprove the existence of Sun Wu himself, we may be sure that he would not have hesitated to assign the work to a later date had he not honestly believed the contrary. And it is precisely on such a point that the judgment of an educated Chinaman will carry most weight. Other internal evidence is not far to seek. Thus, in Chapter 8, Section 1, there is an unmistakable allusion to the ancient system of land tenure, which had already passed away by the time of Mencius, who was anxious to see it revived in a modified form. The only warfare Sun Tzu knows is that carried on between the various feudal princes, in which armored chariots play a large part. Their use seems to have entirely died out before the end of the Zhou dynasty. He speaks as a man of Wu, a state which ceased to exist as early as 473 BC. On this I shall touch presently. But once refer to the work to the 5th century or earlier, and the chances of its being other than a bona fide production are sensibly diminished. The great age of forgeries did not come until long after. That it should have been forged in the period immediately following 473 is particularly unlikely, for no one, as a rule, hastens to identify himself with a lost cause. As for Ye Xuanzin's theory that the author was a literary recluse, that seems to me quite untenable. If one thing is more apparent than another after reading the maxims of Sun Tzu, it is that their essence has been distilled from a large store of personal observation and experience. They reflect the mind not only born of a strategist, gifted with a rare faculty of generalization, but also of a practical scholar, a practical soldier, closely acquainted with the military conditions of his time. To say nothing of the fact that these great sayings have been accepted and endorsed by all the greatest captains of Chinese history, they offer a combination of freshness and sincerity, acuteness and common sense, which quite excludes the idea that they were artificially concocted in the study. If we admit, then, that the 13 chapters were the genuine production of a military man living towards the end of the Chengchu period, are we not bound, in spite of the silence of the Su Chuan, to accept Sima Qian's account on its entirety? In view of his high repute as a sober historian, must we not hesitate to assume that the records he drew upon for Sun Wu's biography were false and untrustworthy, The answer, I fear, must be in the negative. There is still one grave, if not fatal, objection to the chronology involved in the story as told in the Shih-Chi, which, so far as I am aware, nobody has yet pointed out. There are 2 passages in Sun Tzu in which he alludes to contemporary affairs. The first is in chapter 7, section 21. Though according to my estimate the soldiers of Yue exceeded our own in number, that shall advantage them nothing in the matter of victory. I say, then, that victory can be achieved. The other is in chapter 11, section 30. Asked if an army can be made to imitate the Shuiwan, I should answer yes, for the men of Wu and the men of Yue are enemies, yet if they are crossing a river in the same boat and are caught by a storm, they will come to each other's assistance, just as the left hand helps the right. The 2 paragraphs are extremely valuable as evidence of the date of composition. They assign the work to the period of the struggle between Wu and Yue. So much has been observed by Pai Ishuan. But what has hitherto escaped notice is that they also seriously impair the credibility of Sima Qian's narrative. As we have seen above, the first positive date given in connection with Sun Wu is 512 BC. He is then spoken of as a general acting as confidential advisor to Ho Lu, so that his alleged introduction to that monarch had already taken place, and of course the 13 chapters must have been written earlier still. But at that time, and for several years after, down to the capture of Ying in 506, Chu, and not Yue, was the great hereditary enemy of Wu. The 2 states, Chu and Wu, had been constantly at war for over half a century, whereas the first war between Wu and Yue was waged only in 510, and even then was no more than a short interlude sandwiched in the midst of a fierce struggle with Chu. Now, Chu is not mentioned in the 13 chapters at all. The natural inference is that they were written at the time when Yue had become the prime antagonist of Wu, that is, after Chu had suffered the great humiliation of 506. At this point, a table of dates may be found useful. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. So here's the table of dates. I don't think I'm going to read it. More of the table of dates. Oh my gosh, when are we getting to start this book? I don't know. I'll read for a little bit more, and then if we're not there yet, then I'll go see. I'll have to check it out, see when we actually get to the goods. I don't usually read the introductions, but I thought this one would be good because I thought it would be good. I apologize. But we're stuck here, so gosh darn it, we're going to finish reading it. The sentence quoted above from chapter 7, section 21 hardly strikes me as one that could have been written in the full flush of victory. It seems rather to imply that, for the moment at least, the tide had turned against Wu, and that she was getting the worst of the struggle. Hence we may conclude that our treatise was not in existence in 505, before which date Yue does not appear to have scored any notable successes against Wu. Ho Lu died in 496, so that if the book was written for him, it must have been during the period of 505 to 496, when there was a lull in the hostilities, Wu having presumably been exhausted by its supreme effort against Chu. On the other hand, if we choose to disregard the tradition connecting Sun Wu's name with Ho Lu, it might equally well have seen the light between 496 and 494, or possibly in the period 482 to 473, when Yue was once again becoming a very serious menace. We may feel fairly certain that the author, whoever he may have been, was not a man of any great eminence in his own day. On this point, the negative testimony of the Shou Chuan far outweighs any shred of authority still attached to the Shih-Chi, if once its other facts are discredited. Sun Suingyan, however, makes a feeble attempt to explain the omission of his name from the great commentary. It was Wu Suhu, he says, who got all the credit of Sun Wu's exploits because the latter, being an alien, was not rewarded with an office in the state. How, then, did the Sun Tzu legend originate? It may be that the growing celebrity of the book imparted by degrees a kind of facetious renown to its author. It was felt to be only right and proper that one so well versed in the science of war should have solid achievements to his credit as well. Now, the capture of Ying was undoubtedly the greatest feat in the arms of Ho Lu's reign. It made a deep and lasting impression on all the surrounding states and raised Wu to the short-lived zenith of her power. Hence, what more natural as time went on than that the acknowledged master of strategy, Sun Wu, should be popularly identified with that campaign. At first, perhaps only in the sense that his brain conceived and planned it, afterwards, that it was actually carried out by him in conjunction with Wu Yuan, Po Pei, and Fu Kai. It is obvious that any attempt to reconstruct even the outline of Sun Tzu's life must be based almost wholly on conjecture. With this necessary proviso, I should say that he probably entered the service of Wu about the time of Ho Lu's accession, and gathered experience, though only in the capacity of a subordinate officer, during the intense military activity which marked the first half of that prince's reign. If he rose to be a general at all, he was certainly never on an equal footing with the three above mentioned. He was doubtless present at the investment and occupation of Ying and witnessed Wu's sudden collapse in the following year. Yue's attack at this critical juncture, when her rival was embarrassed on every side, seems to have convinced him that this upstart kingdom, which was the great enemy against whom every effort would henceforth have to be directed. Sun Wu was thus a well-seasoned warrior when he sat down to write his famous book, which according to my reckoning must have appeared towards the end rather than the beginning of Ho Lu's reign. The story of the woman may possibly have grown out of some real incident occurring about the same time. As we hear no more of Sun Wu after this from any source, he is hardly likely to have survived his patron or to have taken part in the death struggle with Yue, which began with the disaster at Su Li. If these inferences are approximately correct, there is a certain irony in the fate which decreed that China's most illustrious man of peace should be a contemporary with her greatest writer on war. The text, I think this is starting the book. Holy cow. Let's see. Nope, we're still in the introduction. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. 4 more pages. Oh my gosh. Okay. We're not even going to get into the book today. I think we'll finish up the introduction today. And we'll get started next time on Chapter 1. So, the text of Sun Tzu. I found it difficult to glean much about the history of Sun Tzu's text. The quotations that occur in early authors go to show that the 13 chapters of which Sima Qian speaks were essentially the same as those now extant. We have his word for it that they were widely circulated in his day, and can only regret that he refrained from discussing them on that account. Sun Xingyan says in his preface, during the Qin and Han dynasties, Sun Tzu's art of war was in general use amongst military commanders, but they seem to have treated it as a work of mysterious import and were unwilling to expound it for the benefit of posterity. Thus it came about that Wei Wu was the first to write a commentary on it. As we have already seen, there is no reasonable ground to suppose that Cao Kung tampered with the text, but the text itself is often so obscure, and the number of editions which appeared from that time onward so great, especially during Tang and Sung dynasties, that it would be surprising if numerous corruptions had not managed to creep in. Towards the middle of the Sung period, by the time all the chief commentaries on Sun Tzu were in existence, a certain Qi Tianpao published a work in 15 Chuan entitled Sun Tzu with the collected commentaries of 10 writers. There was another text with variant readings put forward by Chu Fu of Tasheng, which also had supporters among the scholars of that period. But in the Ming editions, Sun Ying-sen tells us these readings were for some reason or another no longer put into circulation. Thus, until the end of the 18th century, the text in sole possession of the field was one derived from Qi Tianpao's edition, although no actual copy of that important work was known to have survived. That, therefore, is the text of Sun Tzu, which appears in the war section of the Great Imperial Encyclopedia, printed in 1726, the Ku Chen Tu Shu Qi Qiang. Another copy at my disposal of what is practically the same text, with slight variations, is that contained in the 11 philosophers of the Zhou and Qin dynasties from 1758. And the Chinese printed in Captain Calthorpe's first edition is evidently a similar version which has filtered through Japanese channels. So things remained until Sun Xiangyan, a distinguished antiquarian and classical scholar, who claimed to be an actual descendant of Sun Wu, accidentally discovered a copy of Qi Tianpao's long-lost work when on a visit to the library of the Huaiyuan Temple. Appended to it was the I Shao of Chang Yuxian mentioned in the Tang Qi and almost believed to have perished. This is what Sun Xiangyan designates as the original edition or text, a rather misleading name, for it cannot by any means claim to set before us the text of Sun Tzu in its pristine purity. Qi Tianpao was a careless compiler, and appears to have been content to reproduce the somewhat debased version current in his day without troubling to collate it with the earliest editions then available. Fortunately, two versions of Sun Tzu, even older than the newly discovered work, were still extant, one buried in the Zhangtian Tu Yu's great treatise on the Constitution, the other similarly enshrined in the Tiaoping Yulan Encyclopedia. In both, the complete text is to be found, though split up into fragments, intermixed with other matter, and scattered piecemeal over a number of different sections. Considering that the Yulan takes us back to the year 983, and the Tiangtian about 200 years further still to the middle of the Tang dynasty, the value of these early transcripts of Sun Tzu can hardly be overestimated. Yet the idea of utilizing them does not seem to have occurred to anyone until Sun Xiangyan, acting under government instructions, undertook a thorough recension of the text. This is his own account. Because of the numerous mistakes in the text of Sun Tzu which his editors had handed down, the government ordered that the ancient edition of Qi Tianpao should be used, and that the text should be revised and corrected throughout. It happened that Wu Nianhu, the governor Pai Kwa, and Sai, a graduate of the second degree, had all devoted themselves to this study, probably surpassing me therein. Accordingly, I have had the work cut on blocks as a textbook for military men. The three individuals here referred to had evidently been occupied on the text of Sun Tzu prior to Sun Xiangyan's commission, but we are left in doubt as the new work they are really accomplished. At any rate, excuse me, I'm going to yawn again. Whew. I don't know what time it is where you're reading this. It's only 7:30 here, but it's dark, and so I just get so tired when it's dark because it's like dark out. At any rate, the new edition, when ultimately produced, appeared in the names of Sun Xiangyan and only one co-editor, Wu Zhenqi. They took the original text as their basis, and by careful comparison with the older versions, as well as the extant commentaries and other sources of information, such as the I Shuao, succeeded in restoring a very large number of doubtful passages, and turned out, on the whole, what must be accepted as the closest approximation we are ever likely to get to Sun Tzu's original work. This is what will hereinafter be denominated the standard text. The copy which I have used belongs to a reissue dated 1877. It is in 6 pen, forming a part of a well-printed set of 23 early philosophical works in 83 pen. It opens with a preface by Sun Xiangyan, largely quoted in this introduction, vindicating the traditional view of Sun Tzu's life and performances, and summing up in remarkably concise fashion the evidence in its favor. This is followed by Cao Kung's preface to his edition, and the biography of Sun Tzu from the Shi Qi, both translated above. Then come, firstly, Chang Yuxian's I Shuo with the author's preface, and next a short miscellany of historical and bibliographical information entitled Sun Tzu Xu Lu, compiled by Pai Ishwin. As regards the body of the work, each separate sentence is followed by a note on the text if required, and then by the various commentaries appertaining to it, arranged in chronological order. These we shall now proceed to discuss briefly one by one. Okay, the commentators. Sun Tzu can boast an exceptionally long and distinguished roll of commentators, which would do honor to any classic. Ouyang Su remarks on this fact, though he wrote before the tale was complete, and rather ingeniously explains it by saying that the artifices of war, being inexhaustible, must therefore be susceptible of treatment in a great variety of ways. Cao Cao, or Cao Kung, afterwards known as Wei Wu Ti, AD 155 to 220, there is hardly any room for doubt that the earliest commentary on Sun Tzu actually came from the pen of this extraordinary man, whose biography in the San Kuo Chi reads like a romance. One of the greatest military geniuses that the world has seen, and Napoleonic in the scale of his operations, he was especially famed for the marvelous rapidity of his marches, which has found expression in the line, "Talk of Cao Cao, and Cao Cao will appear." Ouyang Su says of him that he was a great captain who measured his strength against Tung Chao, Lu Pu, and the two Yuan, father and son, and vanquished them all, whereupon he divided the empire of Han with Wu and Shu and made himself king. It is recorded that whenever a council of war was held by Wei on the eve of a far-reaching campaign, he had all his calculations ready. Those generals who made use of them did not lose one battle in 10. Those who ran counter to them in any particular saw their armies incontinently beaten and put to flight. Cao Kung's notes on Sun Tzu's models of austere brevity are so thoroughly characteristic of the stern commander known to history that it is hard indeed to conceive of them as the work of a mere litterateur. Sometimes, indeed, owing to extreme compression, they are scarcely intelligible and stand no less in need of a commentary than the text itself. As we have seen, Cao Kung is the reputed author of a book on war in 100,000 odd words, now lost, but mentioned in this other book. Mangshi, the commentary which has come down to us under this name, is comparatively meager, and nothing about the author is known. Even his personal name has not been recorded. Chi Tianpao's edition places him after Qianlin, and Chao Kung-Wu also assigns him to the Tang dynasty. But this is obviously a mistake, as his work is mentioned in this book. In Sun Xingyan's preface, he appears as Meng Shi of the Liang dynasty, 502 to 557. Others would identify him with Ming Kang of the 3rd century. In this book, he is named last of the 5 commentators, the others being Wei Wu Ti, Tu Mu, Chen Hao, and Chia Lin. Li Chuan of the 8th century was a well-known writer on military tactics. His book has been in constant use down to the present day. This book mentions lives of famous generals from the Chao to the Tang dynasty as written by him. He is also generally supposed to be the real author of the popular Taoist tract, the whatever this is. According to Chao Kung-Wu in the Tianeko Catalog, he followed the text of Sun Tzu, which differs considerably from those now extant. His notes are mostly short and to the point, and he frequently illustrates his remarks by anecdotes from Chinese history. Tu Yu, died 1812, did not publish a separate commentary on Sun Tzu, his notes being taken from the Tung Tien, the encyclopedic treatise on the Constitution, which was his life work. They are largely repetitions of Cao Kung and Meng Shi because it is believed that he drew on the ancient commentaries of Wang Ling and others. Owing to the peculiar arrangement of the Tung Tien, he had to explain each passage on its merits apart from the context, and sometimes his own explanation does not agree with that of Cao Kung, whom he always quotes first. Though not strictly to be reckoned as one of the 10 commentators, he was added to their number by Qi Tianpo, being wrongly placed after his grandson Tu Mu. Tu Mu, 803 to 852, is perhaps the best known as a poet, a bright star even in the glorious galaxy of the Tang period. We learn from Chao Kung Wu that although he had no practical experience of war, he was extremely fond of discussing this subject and was moreover well read in the military history of the Chun Qiao and Chan Ko eras. His notes, therefore, are well worth attention. They are very copious and replete with historical parallels. The gist of Sun Tzu's work is thus summarized by him. Practice benevolence and justice, but on the other hand make full use of artifice and measures of expediency. He further declared that all the military triumphs and disasters of the 1,000 years which had elapsed since Sun Wu's death would, upon examination, be found to uphold and corroborate in every particular the maxims contained in the book. Tu Mu's somewhat spiteful charge against Cao Kung has already been considered elsewhere. Jian Hao appears to have been a contemporary of Tu Mu. Chao Kung Wu says that he was impelled to write a new commentary on Sun Tzu because Cao Kung's on the one hand was too obscure and subtle, and that of Tu Mu on the other too long-winded and diffuse. Wu Yangsu, writing in the middle of the 11th century, calls Cao Kung, Tu Mu, and Jian Hao the 3 chief commentators on Sun Tzu, and observes that Jian Hao is continually attacking Tu Mu's shortcomings. His commentary, though not lacking in merit, must rank below those of his predecessors. Jia Lin is known to have lived under the Tang dynasty, for his commentary on Sun Tzu is mentioned in this book and was afterwards republished by this other book. Qi Xi of the same dynasty, together with those of Meng Shi and Tu Yu. It is of somewhat scanty texture and in point of quality too, perhaps the least valuable of the 11. Mei Yao Qian, 1002 to 1060, commonly known by his style as Mei Shang Yu, was, like Tu Mu, a poet of distinction. His commentary was published with a laudatory preface by the great Wu Yangsu, from which we may call the following. Later scholars have misread Sun Tzu, distorting his words and trying to make them square with their own one-sided views. Thus, though commentators have not been lacking, only a few have proved equal to the task. My friend Shang Yu has not fallen into this mistake. In attempting to provide a critical commentary for Sun Tzu's work, he does not lose sight of the fact that these sayings were intended for states engaged in internecine warfare, that the author is not concerned with the military conditions prevailing under the sovereigns of the 3 ancient dynasties, nor with the 9 punitive measures prescribed to the minister of war. Again, Sun Wu loved brevity of diction, but his meaning is always deep, whether the subject be marching an army or handling soldiers, or estimating the enemy or controlling the forces of victory. It is always systematically treated. The sayings are bound together in strict logical sequence, though this has been obscured by commentators who have probably failed to grasp their meaning. In his own commentary, Mei Xingyu has brushed aside all the obstinate prejudices of these critics and has tried to bring out the true meaning of Sun Tzu himself. In this way, the clouds of confusion have been dispersed and the sayings made clear. I am convinced that the present work deserves to be handed down side by side with the 3 great commentaries, for a great deal that they find in the sayings coming generations will have constant reason to thank my friend Shang Yu. Making some allowance for the exuberance of friendship, I am I am inclined to endorse this favorable judgment, and would certainly place him above Qian Hao in order of merit. Wang Sai, also of the Sung dynasty, is decidedly original in some of his interpretations, but much less judicious than Mei Yao Qian, and on the whole not a very trustworthy guide. He is fond of comparing his own commentary to that of Cao Kung, but the comparison is not often flattering to him. We learn from Chao Kung Wu that Wang Sai revised the ancient text of Sun Tzu, filling up lacunae and correcting mistakes. Ho Yan Sai of the Sung dynasty. The personal name of this commentator is given as above by Cheng Qiao of the Tung Chi, written about the middle of the 12th century, but he appears simply as Ho Shi in the Yu Hai, and Ma Tualin quotes Chao Kung Wu as saying that his personal name is unknown. There seems to be no reason to doubt Cheng Qiao's statement, otherwise I should have been inclined to hazard a guess and identify him with one Ho Chu Fai, the author of a short treatise on war entitled this, who lived in the latter part of the 11th century. Ho Shi's commentary, in the words of Tienico Catalogue, contains helpful additions here and there, but is chiefly remarkable for the copious extracts taken in adapted form from the dynastic histories and other sources. Chang Yu. The list closes with a commentator of no great originality, perhaps, but gifted with admirable powers of lucid exposition. His commentary is based on that of Cao Kung, whose terse sentences he contrives to expand and develop in masterly fashion. Without Chang Yu, excuse me. Without Chang Yu, it is safe to say that much of Cao Kung's commentary would have remained cloaked in its pristine obscurity and therefore valueless. His work is not mentioned in the Sung history, the Tung Cao, or the Yu Hai, but it finds a niche in the Tung Chi, which also names him as the author of Lives of Famous Generals. It is rather remarkable that the last named four should all have flourished within so short a space of time. Chao Kung Wu accounts for it by saying, during the early years of the Sung dynasty, the empire enjoyed a long spell of peace, and men ceased to practice the art of war. But when Chao Yuan Hao's rebellion came in 1038 to 42, and the frontier generals were defeated time after time, the court made strenuous inquiry for men skilled in war, and military topics became vogue amongst all the high officials. Hence it is that the commentators of Sun Tzu and our dynasty belong mainly to that period. Besides these 11 commentators, there are several others whose work has not come down to us. The Sui Shu mentions 4, namely Wang Ling, often quoted by Tu Yu, Chang Susheng, Chia Su of Wei, and Xin Yu of Wu. The Tang Shu adds Sun Hao and Tung Chi, Sao Chi, while the Tu Shu mentions a Ming commentator, Wang Zhenyu. It is possible that some of these may have been merely collectors and editors of other commentaries, like Qi Tian Pao and Qi Si mentioned above. Certainly in the case of the latter, the entry in the Tung Cao without the following note would give one to understand that he had written an independent commentary of his own. There are 2 works described in the Zukuchuan Shu, and no doubt extremely rare, which I should much like to have seen. One is entitled This, in 5 Chuan. It gives selections from 4 new commentators, probably of the Ming dynasty, as well as from the 11 known to us. The names of the 4 are Cai Yuan, Cheng Hao, Li Zai, and Wang Chicheng. The other work is this name in 4 Chuan, compiled by Cheng Tuan of the present dynasty. It is a compendium of information on ancient warfare. It is a compendium of information on ancient warfare with special reference to Sun Tzu's 13 chapters. Appreciations of Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu has experienced a potent fascination over the minds of some of China's greatest men. Among the famous generals who are known to have studied his pages with enthusiasm may be mentioned Han Sen, BC 196, Fang I AD 34, Lu Meng 219, I assume AD, and Yo Fei 1103 to 1141. The opinion of Cao Kung, who disputes with Han Sen the highest place in Chinese military annals, has already been recorded. Still more remarkable in one way is the testimony of purely literary men such as Su Sun, Su Sun, the father of Su Tung Pao, who wrote several essays on military topics, all of which owe their chief inspiration to Sun Tzu. The following short passage by him is preserved in the Yuhai. Sun Wu saying that in war one cannot make certain of conquering is very different indeed from what other books tell us. Wu Qi was a man of the same stamp as Sun Wu. They both wrote books on war, and they are linked together in popular speech as Sun and Wu. But Wu Qi's remarks on war are less weighty, his rules are rougher and more crudely stated, and there is not the same unity of plan as in Sun Tzu's work, where the style is terse but the meaning fully brought out. In this book, chapter 17 contains the following extract from Impartial Judgments in the Garden of Literature by Cheng Hao. Sun Tzu's 13 chapters are not only the staple and base of all military men's training, but also compel the most careful attention of scholars. But also compel the most careful attention of scholars and men of letters. His sayings are terse yet elegant, simple yet profound, perspicuous and eminently practical. Such works as the Lin Yu, the I Ching, and the Great Commentary, as well as the writings of Mencius, Sun Kang, and Yang Chu, all fall below the level of Sun Tzu. Chu Sai, commenting on this, fully admits the first part of the criticism, although he dislikes the audacious comparison of the venerated classical works. Language of this sort, he says, encourages a ruler's bent towards unrelenting warfare and reckless militarism. Apologies for war. Accustomed as we are to think of China as the greatest peace-loving nation on earth, we are in some danger of forgetting that her experience of war in all its phases has also been such as no modern state can parallel. Her long military annals stretch back to a point at which they are all lost in the mists of time. She had built the Great Wall and was maintaining a huge standing army along her frontier centuries before the first Roman legionary was seen on the Danube. What with the perpetual collisions of the ancient feudal states, the grim conflicts of the Huns, Turks, and other invaders after the centralization of government, and terrific upheavals which accompanied the overthrow of so many dynasties, besides the countless rebellions and minor disturbances that have flamed up and flickered out again one by one, it is hardly too much to say that the clash of arms has ever ceased to resound in one portion or another of the empire. No less remarkable is the succession of illustrious captains to whom China can point with pride. As in all countries, the greatest are found emerging at the most fateful crises of her history. Thus, Po Chi stands out conspicuous in the period when Qian was entering upon her final struggles with the remaining independent states. The stormy years which followed the breakup of the Qian dynasty are illumined by the transcendent genius of Han Sen. When the House of Han, in turn, is tottering to its fall, the great and baleful figure of Cao Cao dominates the scene. And in the establishment of the Tang dynasty, one of the mightiest tasks achieved by man, the superhuman energy of Li Shimin, afterwards the Emperor Taizong, was seconded by the brilliant strategy of Li Qing. None of these generals need fear comparison with the greatest names in the military history of Europe. In spite of all this, the great body of Chinese sentiment from Lao Tzu downwards, and especially as reflected in the standard literature of Confucianism, has been consistently pacific and intensely opposed to militarism in any form. It is such an uncommon thing to find any of the literati defending warfare on principle that I have thought it was worthwhile to collect and translate a few passages in which the unorthodox view is upheld. The following by Sima Qian shows that for all his ardent admiration of Confucius, he was yet no advocate of peace at any price. Military weapons are the means used by the sage to punish violence and cruelty, to give peace to troublous times, to remove difficulties and dangers, and to succor those who are in peril. Every animal with blood in its veins and horns on its head will fight when it is attacked. How much more so will man, who carries in his breast the faculties of love and hatred, joy and anger. When he is pleased, a feeling of affection springs up within him. When angry, his poisoned sting is brought into play. That is the natural law which governs his being. What then shall be said of those scholars of our time, blind to all the great issues and without any appreciation of relative values, who can only bark out their stale formulas about virtue and civilization, condemning the use of military weapons? They will surely bring our country to impotence and dishonor and the loss of her rightful heritage, or at the very least, they will bring about invasion and rebellion, sacrifice of territory, and general enfeeblement. Yet they obstinately refuse to modify the position they have taken up. The truth is that, just as in the family, the teacher must not spare the rod, and punishments cannot be dispensed within the state, so military chastisement can never be allowed to fall into abeyance in the empire. All one can say is that this power will be exercised wisely by some, foolishly by others, and that among those who bear arms, some will be loyal and others rebellious. The next piece is taken from Tu Mu's preface to his commentary on Sun Tzu. War may be defined as punishment, which is one of the functions of government. It was the profession of Cheng Yu and Jan Chu, both disciples of Confucius. Nowadays, in holding trials and hearing of litigation, the imprisonment of offenders and their execution by flogging in the marketplace, all are done by officials. But the wielding of huge armies and throwing down of fortified cities, the hailing of women and children into captivity, and the beheading of traitors, this is also the work which is done by officials. The objects of the rack and the military weapons are essentially the same. There is no intrinsic difference between punishment of flogging and the cutting off heads in war. For the lesser infractions of law, which are easily dealt with, only a small amount of force need be employed, hence the institution of torture and flogging. For more serious outbreaks of lawlessness, which are hard to suppress, a greater amount of force is necessary, hence the use of military weapons and wholesale decapitation. In both cases, however, the end in view is to get rid of wicked people and to give comfort and relief to the good. Chi's son asked Yan Wu, saying, "Have you, sir, acquired your military aptitude by study, or is it innate?" Yan Wu replied, "It has been acquired by study." "How can that be so?" said Chi's son, "seeing that you are a disciple of Confucius." "It is a fact," replied Yan Wu. "I was taught by Confucius. It is fitting that the great sage should exercise both civil and military functions, though to be sure my instruction in the art of fighting has not yet gone very far." Now, who the author was of this rigid distinction between the civil and the military, and the limitation of each to a separate sphere of action, or in what year of which dynasty was first introduced, is more than I can say. But at any rate, it has come about that the members of the governing class are quite afraid of enlarging on military topics, or do so only in shamefaced manner. If any are bold enough to discuss the subject, they are at once set down as eccentric individuals with coarse and brutal propensities. This is an extraordinary instance of the way in which, through sheer lack of reasoning, men unhappily lose sight of fundamental principles. When the Duke of Chao was minister under Chang Wang, he regulated ceremonies and made music and venerated the arts of scholarship and learning. Yet when the barbarians of the river Huai revolted, he sallied forth and chastised them. When Confucius held office under the Duke of Lu and a meeting was convened in Jiaqiu, he said, "If pacific negotiations are in progress, warlike preparations should have been made beforehand." He rebuked and shamed the Marquis of Qi, who cowered under him and dared not to proceed to violence. How can it be said that these two great sages had no knowledge of military matters? We have seen that the great Chu Si held Sun Tzu in high esteem. He also appeals to the authority of the classics. Our master Confucius, answering Duke Ling of Wei, said, I have never studied matters connected with armies and battalions. Replying to Kung Wensu, he said, I have not been instructed about buff coats and weapons. But if we turn to the meeting at Chiaku, we find that he used armed force against the men of Lai, so that the Marquis of Chi was overawed. Again, when the inhabitants of Pai revolted, he ordered his officers to attack them, whereupon they were defeated and fled in confusion. He once uttered the words, If I fight, I conquer. And Yan Wu also said, oops, we're going to pause for just a second. I'm here for tech support. That was one of my children offering tech support, but he hasn't downloaded this yet because I'm not streaming on my other platform. So, let's see. Where was I? Confucius said, I am unversed in military matters. He also said, if I fight, I conquer. Confucius ordered ceremonies and regulated music. Now, war constitutes one of the 5 classes of state ceremonial and must not be treated as an independent branch of study. Hence, the words I am unversed in must be taken to mean there are things which even an inspired teacher does not know. Those who have to lead an army and devise stratagems must learn the art of war. But if one can command the services of a good general like Sun Tzu, who was employed by Wu Suxiu, there is no need to learn it oneself. Hence the remark added by Confucius, if I fight, I conquer. The men of the present day, however, willfully interpret those words of Confucius in their narrowest sense, as though he meant that books on the art of war are not worth reading. With blind persistency, they adduce the example of Chao Kuo, who pored over his father's books to no purpose, as a proof that all military theory is useless. Again, seeing that books on war have to do with such things as opportunism in designing plans and the conversion of spies, they hold that the art is immoral and unworthy of a sage. These people ignore the fact that the studies of our scholars and the civil administration of our officials also require steady application and practice before efficiency is reached. The ancients were particularly chary of allowing mere novices to botch their work. Weapons are baneful and fighting perilous, and unless the general is in constant practice, he ought not to hazard other men's lives in battle. Hence, it is essential that Sun Tzu's 13 chapters should be studied. Sang Liang used to instruct his nephew Qi in the art of war. Qi got a rough idea of the art in its general bearings, but would not pursue his studies to their proper outcome, the consequence being that he was finally defeated and overthrown. He did not realize that the tricks and artifices of war are beyond verbal computation. Duke Xiang of Sung and King Yan of Su were brought to destruction by their misplaced humanity. The treacherous and underhand nature of war necessitates the use of guile and stratagem suited to the occasion. There's a case on record of Confucius himself having violated an extorted oath, and also of his having left the Sung state in disguise. Can we then recklessly arraign Sun Tzu for disregarding truth and honesty? Man, I could have sworn that we were done with this introduction before now. 1, 2, 3. Okay. But this is really just the bibliography, and I'm not going to read the bibliography. Those are all the books that he references. Okay, so that was long. Let's see, do we get to a chapter finally? Whoa, what happened? Woo. Aha. I think this is it. This must be it right here. So this is where we'll start next time, assuming it loads. That's just crazy. I won't worry about it today, though. We'll get it taken care of by next time. Okay, so thank you for joining me. That was a lot. I'm kind of exhausted from reading it, but it was fun. And at least I finally started to read this book. So I wish I knew how to pronounce some of those names a little bit better, maybe a lot better. I don't know. Um, but at least we spent some time together and we read. We used our brains a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. But it was fun and it was nice to meet you. And I hope that you enjoy listening to me reading and my little side comments as I read. I'm glad I'm finally starting to read this book. And it's 13 chapters, so maybe at the most it'll take us 13 days, but maybe some of these chapters will be a little bit shorter and I can read 1 or 2 chapters in the hour. We've been on here for a long time, but we at least got through the whole introduction. So feel free to message me or follow me or whatever. I'm also on Twitter, of course, and I've got some other streamings, but this is the one that I'm going to use whenever I do my my reading because that's what I want to do. And I want to share it with you. And so I hope that you enjoy it. So I hope everybody has a good night. Today is actually when I'm recording this. This is January the 1st here, January the 1st, 2023 here in the United States. So I hope everybody had a happy new year and I think we're off to a great start. So I will talk to everyone later. Have a good night and we will see you next time. Goodbye.